Welcome back to Next Gen Console Watch, our show following all the news and rumors on the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X. I'm Damon Hatfield, and as always, I'm joined by Jonathan Dornbush, host of our PlayStation podcast Beyond.
Beyond. Hey, Damon, it's hard to believe it's been 100 days.
Certainly is. Hard to believe. And Ryan McCaffrey, host of IGN's Xbox podcast Unlocked.
I have a feeling the next couple hundred will be even better.
I think every 100 days should get better and better and better. This is a very special episode. We're checking in on the first 100 days on these new gen consoles, both the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X. Bit of a disclaimer right at the front. We're recording this before Sony's State of Play presentation on February 25th, so none of that will be included. But of course, that's happening after the first 100 days anyway, so it wouldn't have disqualified if you wanted to have your State of Play included here, Sony. You should have held it earlier in the month. Anyway, first 100 days is a good time to check in, see how things are going. We gave both these consoles an 8 out of 10 at release. Great out of 10. I wonder if our feelings have changed at all over the last 100 days. Let's start with the most important aspect of any video game console, the game library. I think at launch, you had your pretty usual assortment of third-party games. You had your Assassin's Creed, you had your Call of Duty, Watch Dogs, Immortals Fenyx Rising. Of course, shortly after launch, there you had your Cyberpunk. But looking at those third parties did kind of dry up in the new year, by the way. I think Hitman 3 has really been the only big new game since then. But let's think about exclusives. Definitely PlayStation, unsurprisingly, continues to have the upper hand at that point. I think as of now, for PS5, we've got Astro's Playroom, Spider-Man, Demon Souls, Bugsnax, Sackboy, The Pathless, and Destruction All-Stars. And then we're getting next-gen upgrades of PlayStation exclusives like God of War, which I played through, again, from start to finish, and just had a blast. So, Jonathan, let's begin with you. When you look at that, that actually seems like a pretty decent, first-party exclusive lineup in the first 100 days.
Yeah, I'm really happy with it, especially I think comparing it back to the PS4's launch. Of course, it's worth saying that a lot of those games that you listed are cross-gen. So for people who have not been able to get a PS5 because of shortage issues and whatnot, or just weren't able to afford one at this time, since they're not cheap still, there are still opportunities to play stuff like Spider-Man and Sackboy, Bugsnax, The Pathless on PS4. But in terms of like PS5 exclusives, it's definitely not been, a ton so far. We're only in the first 100 days after all, but Astro's Playroom is, I think, probably the best sort of pack-in experience / proof of concept since Wii Sports when it comes to showing what the DualSense can do. And I think it's hard to find someone who wasn't charmed by how delightful Astro's Playroom was. Demon Souls was a PS5 exclusive, and it's beautiful. It's definitely one of the prettiest games I've ever played. And at least for me, single-handedly, I have to thank for my now love of the Soulsborne genre. I'm fully on that train now. I'm just completely enraptured by them. So having that there at launch was really great. Destruction All-Stars, I think, has had a bit of a rocky launch. It's there is a really great core to the gameplay loop there, but I think the limited amount of modes and sort of the lack of reasons to keep the grind going to level up aren't quite there yet. But it's free on PlayStation Plus for this month and next month, so it's getting a lot of players in early. They already promise new modes and new ideas and things that are coming on the way. They've started detailing that stuff, so there is a hope there for sure. But like overall, Miles Morales has been great. Demon Souls was great. Sackboy is really fun. All these games, even if they've been cross-gen or not, have been really, really great examples of what Sony's first-party stable of developers is capable of.
And comparing this first 100 days exclusives back to the PlayStation 4, I don't think PS5 is doing worse. And I think arguably it's been better than on PS4. Because PS4 you had you had Killzone Shadowfall, Knack, Resogun, maybe a couple of smaller ones. There was a PS Network game that dealt with shadows. I forget what the name of that one was called.
Yes. Yeah, I know which one you're talking about. Yes, yeah.
But then, that was about it, because the infamous Second Son wouldn't arrive until March 21st. So I think PS5 is doing a little bit better.
It was definitely a bit of a quieter launch. And so for me, comparing one to one, yes, Killzone, Shadowfall, Knack, and Resogun were all exclusives to the PS4, though I think Resogun was cross-gen at some point with PS3. even if there were more focus on next gen exclusives, I would say Killzone and Knack haven't quite stood the test of time. Whereas I think we'll look back on Demon Souls, Miles Morales, Astro's Playroom, like this whole group is a really, really solid launch for PlayStation. I think it's definitely been a more exciting launch in my opinion, and I think it's kept me busier since launch day than the PS4's launch certainly did.
So Ryan, looking at exclusives on Xbox Series X tells a different story, but of course there are other benefits to the Series X. The Medium is really the only true exclusive on the Xbox Series X right now. Is that correct?
Is the only next gen total exclusive, not available on Xbox One. You can only play it on Series X or Series X. Yeah, that is it so far. So it's been dry.
I want to give a shout out to Monster Train, even though it's also on PC, but they have a console exclusive, and Monster Train is amazing. I put a lot of hours into that game this year already. But then Xbox, the whole Xbox ecosystem is really more about Game Pass, right? Like that's kind of like I've said before, I skipped the Xbox One generation almost entirely. So coming into Xbox Series X, diving into Game Pass, even though there aren't like new exclusive games for it, there's this incredible library with so many great games that you get to play for no additional charge over your monthly fee. That's kind of like the real draw to Xbox for me. How about you?
Yeah, it's that cannot be discounted. I'm glad you mentioned it because it really is just an insane value that, you get your free trial out of the box and you can just go on all kinds of stuff. Now, that said, stuff like Gears 5, Forza Horizon 4, Halo the Master Chief Collection, and a number of others have received Series X optimizations. So they are older games, but if somebody like yourself comes in and has Game Pass and that stuff's all there, it is dialed up to take advantage of the Series X. So that's good. But yeah, the heavy hitters, the Microsoft's up to something like 23 first party studios now after the Bethesda ZeniMax acquisition. But yeah, we are still waiting for that dam to finally burst. But it's like the water's rising, but the dam has not exploded yet. We have not started getting that consistent flow of games, which Sony's done such a great job of on the PlayStation side for most of the last generation.
I do have to note, though, I've been playing Skyrim recently for the first time in 10 years because it's part of Game Pass. And that promise in the new generation that loading times would be going away, that actually is literally true when you play Skyrim today on Xbox Series X. I'm not exaggerating. The load times when you fast travel or enter a new location, it might be 1 second. It might be literally 1 second long. It's really, really nice playing that 10-year-old game on the Series X today. It was a bit of a different story for the Xbox One, though, Ryan, at launch. I think in terms of exclusives at launch, you had Dead Rising 3.
Yep.
And then smaller games. There was Crimson Dragon. That's probably a game a lot of people haven't thought of in a long time. Ubisoft had a Kinect exclusive with Fighter Within.
That's probably the worst game at launch. It was an exceptionally bad Kinect game.
There was a golf game called Power Star Golf, I think, with like giant mechs, if I remember that correctly.
No. There's a guy that looks exactly like me, except with a mustache in it. It's sort of just really weird. It was actually a pretty good game. Yeah, that was pretty good. But no, you mentioned Dead Rising 3, but you had Forza Motorsport 5, which was a world-class racing game. That's a fantastic game. You mentioned Crimson Dragon, not that great. Dead Rising 3 was very good. But then you had kind of the cult classic, a game that was kind of mixed reviews, mixed opinions at the time, but has kind of come to be adored over time, and that's Rise: Son of Rome.
It's adored now? Wow, that's news to me.
It's thought pretty well of in the Xbox. I mean, the story is fantastic. Like the combat's repetitive, yes, but it's a gorgeous game with a really excellent story, compelling lead character. But yeah, and then there were even a couple of like Loco Cycle was another first party game, not very good.
Yeah.
In that case, Killer Instinct, a very good game that was there at launch. It's been added to over time. But yeah, you had a pretty strong first party showing for the Xbox One launch, which was it's kind of the flip. It's like a almost exact mirror opposite, because everything else about the Xbox One's launch was terrible. The pricing, the forced Connect bundle, the bad messaging, the fact that it was underpowered, it was more money than the PS4 and it was less powerful. And then it's kind of the opposite, but you had some good, strong first party games, and then it's the total opposite now with the Series X by comparison, where you've got just awesome hardware, more powerful than its competition, priced exactly the same, priced competitively, all these great services and things built into the box, super quiet machine, backwards compatibility, all that stuff, but then just nothing there on the first party game side just yet.
And of course, things did dry up for the Xbox One going into the new year, and then we really wouldn't get a big release.
I would humbly point you to Titanfall, which I was going to say phenomenal.
March, that was early March when that would arrive. Yeah.
Still the launch window.
So 100 days in, both of these new consoles are still incredibly hard to find. I did a search of a bunch of internet retailers, Amazon, Best Buy, GameStop. Just before I recorded this, nothing available anywhere. It reminds me of of the Wii 2 generations ago, and how difficult that was to find, and how common it was to find them on resellers with jacked up prices.
The 360
I don't remember.
Was tough to find. The 360 around that time was also tough until around this time. Actually, about February is when, as I recall, that it started to clear.
I just don't remember the PS4 and Xbox One being this way. Jonathan, do you?
No, I wasn't working in the on the journalism side at the time. I was still in college, and I missed pre-ordering a PS4 for launch window, and then I think it was the week before launch. I happened to go on Amazon. They just had it was just easily available. I just bought one. And it was easy, and I got it a couple days later. So it definitely felt like a much smoother process for me personally. Then I think part of it is, especially on the PS5 side, like going back to that day when pre-orders first became available, even though they weren't supposed to be available on that day, I think kind of set the tone for just how much of a debacle it's kind of been since then, both with pre-orders, then all the scalping that we've seen and all the stories around that sort of thing, reselling and all of that. It's just sort of been a consistently chaotic mess, and it's definitely, I can understand the frustration of players who just wanted to be able to buy a system and weren't able to, and haven't really gotten much visibility on when they'll be able to.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I think if we were to check in on the first 200 days somewhere down the line on this show, we'd probably still be talking about availability issues. I don't expect that to ease up in the first half of the year. But let's talk about hardware reliability. I don't think either console has experienced anything, certainly nothing that marred the launch of these consoles the way Cyberpunk's launch was marred late last year. But I think, is it true? Is it fair, Jonathan, to say that the PS5 has maybe had more issues than Xbox? There were some issues right at launch with people not being able to download the PS5 versions of games. And now, of course, we're hearing things about drift in the new DualSense controller. I don't think we've been hearing anything like that on the Xbox side.
Yeah, I would definitely say the chatter around both at launch, we saw a more proportionate amount of PS5 discussion issues going on for sure. But the interesting thing about it is that we're seeing the DualSense drift discussion come up right now, and we're still really trying to get a sense of how widespread that is. Around launch, we were seeing a lot of talk. You had mentioned people were basically getting the PS4 version to download, even when they were trying to, download the PS5 version. There were definitely some system crashes that seemed to be regularly going on. What was interesting was, though, that so many different problems were happening that there was no singular red ring of death issue, thankfully. But there was nothing that seemed to be wide scale across every PS5. There have definitely still been recurring issues. I still see people, complaining about software crashes, and as we've seen DualSense drift more pop up, there definitely seems to have been more of a repeated pattern of problems. But thankfully, at least nothing has seemed to have been that widespread en masse sort of red ring of death thing just yet.
Yeah. Ryan, fingers crossed, no red ring of death for the Xbox Series X.
Yeah, I mean, the original Xbox One, which we just got done talking about the launch of. I mean, you remember it was a big old VCR, but that I feel like was very much on purpose because it had that huge fan on top, and noticed that the overheating problem was gone. You've never heard about an overheating problem on any kind of scale with Xbox since the 360. I mean, the original Xbox One was fine. Obviously, the One S and the One X have been great, and the Series X and Series S are whisper quiet, and they run super cool. They're just not. It is Microsoft's completely solved that problem.
Yeah. Let's talk about some of the features that were hyped ahead of launch. Things like load times that I mentioned. I mentioned that Skyrim is enjoying virtually no load times on Series X. Of course, it's a 10-year-old game. In my experience, playing new games like Assassin's Creed Valhalla, Cyberpunk, there are definitely still loading times, right? Like, Jonathan, is that been? Do you think that was like is that a claim that new gen games haven't been able to live up to yet?
Yes and no. There are definitely load times, but I do feel like they have been less of a barrier to entry so far. Like I would definitely say something like Demon Souls, when you fast travel between different locations, like there is a load, but it's very short. Like when you die, it's extremely short. It's much shorter than I've gone back and been playing some of the Soulsborne's games, and there are definitely much more egregious longer loading times in the past. And here it is definitely quicker. Same with Spider-Man Miles Morales. Like you can get into Spider-Man on PS5 so much more quickly than you did get into Spider-Man when it first came out on PS4. So there are improvements for sure, but I think we are, as these games get more technologically ambitious and are taking more advantage of all of these things and are, engaging with the ray tracing and even with the fast SSDs, I kind of always thought in the back of my mind, well, the loading may be a little faster now, but as the games get more ambitious and more technologically advanced, isn't it possible the load times will kind of creep back in? I definitely think, with backward compatibility, it's been a breeze. I'm with you there on the PS4 as well. Playing some old games has been great. But yeah, Assassin's Creed, Hitman, there's still some initial long load times that aren't completely gone.
Mm-hmm. And Ryan, Xbox has the quick resume feature on Series X. Has that been like a legitimate quality of life improvement for you?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, it's there. It works. It's pretty reliable, and that's been super nice to have. And I think that's safe to call that a promise fulfilled on Microsoft's part.
Jonathan, what about the activity cards on PS5? I thought that was really interesting when that was announced, but now as I've used my PS5, I haven't really interacted with activity cards, barely at all myself. Is that really a feature that is being made use of to the fullest extent yet?
I think we're getting better with it as time goes on. I also completely have not really used it since launch. I used it a little bit for Demon Souls and Spider-Man because it was very easy to essentially use as a quick drop in to actually avoid any of the initial loads. You can kind of just click that and you don't have to go through the main menu if it's not the game that you have booted up. They've been most useful to me as a way to essentially fast travel into a game that I don't have booted up. But other than that, in terms of the game help, I used it very slightly with Sackboy. I think the card usage that we've seen from a thing like Control, the Ultimate Edition, they really seem to lean in and make it pretty robust, is really helpful and useful, but at least for me personally, I haven't seen a need to actually use them just yet. I do think across the board, there could either be a better integration with them. I think they need to be a little bit more customizable. I'm often, swiping through some that are like a message from your friend that I've already read, or like a party that you joined 5 days ago that I don't need to worry about right now. Like, I wish I could more easily kind of control what I'm getting and what I'm seeing, and maybe even pin, like, I know I'm always going to jump into Fortnite every night. Let me just put Fortnite there. Things like that. I think that service could definitely use some fine tuning for sure.
Mm-hmm. And finally, Ryan, Microsoft introduced a new feature called FPS Boost for Series X with a handful of games. They're older games, but good games, and games that you could certainly enjoy revisiting with this sort of enhanced feature. I can't remember. Have those games already received this boost? Is this feature implemented now?
Yeah, it's there for you now. So it's a handful to start with, but I'm sure there are going to be more. Sniper Elite 4, UFC 4, Watch Dogs 2, Far Cry 4, and there might be one other one. New Super Lucky's Tale, which is the one that's going up to 120 frames per second.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, Xbox already had, they'd promised ahead of time, hey, your old games are going to look better and run better. And, well, they've not only made good on that promise, but they've gone and exceeded their own expectation and goal on that.
Okay, so that's like a sort of a high-level bird's eye view of the first 100 days for each console. Jonathan, closing thoughts. We'll start with you. Are you happy with the PS5's first 100 days? Anything that's been sort of a disappointment for you?
I'm really happy with my personal experience of it, and I'm pretty unhappy with the sort of rollout and messaging, I think, of the 100 days. I think the games I've played that have been exclusives or cross-gen exclusives have been great pretty much across the board. Like, I think it's an excellent starting library. I love the DualSense. You know, we spent months hearing developers tell us how it'll make us feel when we get into a game, but to then actually experience it. And it definitely hasn't had the fullest extent taken advantage of, but even small uses of it in Demon Souls and Spider-Man, and then definitely, of course, Astro's Playroom, I've really enjoyed what's there. I'm generally pretty happy with my use of it, but I'm a little at least disheartened by, I think, Sony's reticence to talk too much about sort of what the future looks like. And of course, we're about to have a state of play that will talk more about the games that are coming ahead. But we haven't quite gotten clear messaging. There was one tweet before the PS5 came out where Sony said, "We apologize for the way the rollout of these pre-orders happened. That shouldn't have been it, and we'll promise to keep more in touch and be better about this." And I don't really think they've lived up to that. I would love to see, I think, a little bit more of direct relation to the fans and to the audience in the way that I think we see a lot more on the Xbox side, especially when shortage is such a concern and when people just want to know when they can get this thing. I think being a little more communicative would go a long way.
Well, speaking of the Xbox side, Ryan, what are your final thoughts on the first 100 days of the Series X?
Well, I mean, I'll be flatly honest with you, Damon. I think for those of you out there who have not been able to get your hands on an Xbox Series X yet and have wanted to do so, the good news for you is you're honestly not missing much thus far. I mean, as I said, it is a great console. I stand by my 8 out of 10, great out of 10 review. It is a fantastic machine, but the games situation is just dire. I mean, again, I'm happy that 343 is taking an extra year on Halo to make it as awesome as it can possibly be. But the gap, the hole that Halo left in that launch lineup it's really just incredible in the sense, because, you know, we'd have Halo right now if everything had gone according to plan. It could be playing multiplayer, co-op, doing Legendary Run with all the skulls on, et cetera, et cetera. You know, that would be the big thing we could still be enjoying right now. But without it, there's just been nothing. And even, you know, on the PlayStation side, we've got Ratchet and Clank to look forward to in June, which, yes, June is still pretty far away, but there's not even that on the Xbox side. Like, we know there's a lot coming. We've seen, I mean, Microsoft has so much stuff cooking on the first party side. And my best guess is that Psychonauts 2 is probably going to be the next significant first party release. If not that, then Flight Simulator for Xbox, which has a summer window on it. And technically Psychonauts 2 has no window attached to it. But yeah, there's nothing even on the calendar to look forward to exclusives wise. Not that there aren't going to be great games. I mean, we talked about on this show, a couple weeks ago, whatever it was, the month of May, there's some really, Biomutant and Resident Evil Village and a couple of other things that are there to look forward to in May. But exclusive wise on Xbox, the drought continues. It is going to end. Like, I know people are tired of hearing that, and I'm tired of saying it and also hearing it. But yeah, that frustrating wait for first-party exclusive content continues.
Well, dear viewers, how about you? We want to know how you feel about the first 100 days of your PS5 or Series X. We have a poll that you can vote on IGN.com. Make sure to vote, and we will share the results with you next week. And that will do it for this edition of Next Gen Console Watch. Here's to the next 100 days of these new consoles. Thank you to both Ryan and Jonathan. We'll be back next week, Friday, 6 a.m. Pacific, 9 a.m. Eastern, with more PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X news. We'll see you then.